Where do you see the current tension in the financial markets in the world today?
With all recent events, people I feel like slowly losing trust into the established institutions that been there for a long time. I think crypto and I think stable coins especially is a very good foundation to bring back attention from the speculation which was mostly dominating the industry for so many years and bring it back to practical use case of transferring money between countries and provide a fundamentally much better rails for that. And I think stable coins like USDC, I think is one of the best tools actually to bring back trust in dollar worldwide. Because for me, we almost at a point where United States either can take a path of further isolation with maybe releasing its own CBDC and imposing a very strict rules on this digital form of dollar, or it can actually embrace stable coins like USDC or Tether and create this open API for digital dollar that everyone around the world can use and benefit from. So I think we're at this exciting inflection point, and I'm really hopeful that enough people who care will push the idea for this more open dollar rather than a closed dollar that nobody will want to have and will further impact and increase dollarization that people are start talking about.
Would you agree that the primary difference there between these two paths that you just identified,
Mhm.
being the Tether USDC path and then the Fed now or the centralization path of the federal government, is the primary difference there the ability for the government to stop transactions and maybe take people's money directly? Whereas ultimately, they, being the Federal Reserve, still control the total number of dollars in circulation. So, in that sense, the federal government still maintains a strong grip on the global economics, even if we're using like stable coins, USDC, and Tether. Curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think yes, fundamentally, federal government still have power to emit more dollars and so on. But I think with CBDC approach, they actually have a direct control of individuals' balances. So it's basically not even behind the scene. It will be a blockchain most likely. It will be just a big database that United States maintain. And then if they don't like a particular individual or a company, they could easily have a tool to make this balance zero or completely freeze it. While with approach like USDC or Tether, it's some sort of separation of power. So for US government to directly try to stop the money movement, they have to work through this different set of partners and they have to have a proper legal basis to come to them. It will be a much more complicated and non-straightforward process. So maybe only few oligarchs that will be on the radar could be blocked. But for regular people, smaller customers, it will be much harder in this case.
Interesting. Yeah, I certainly see the obvious threat of coming down the middle where the US government said, hey, we're going to launch a CBDC. It's not going to be on blockchain. I think there's too much prepared resistance to that. And I think what seems to be happening, and you tell me your thoughts, is it seems like the government is not calling it a CBDC. They're calling it the Fed Now program. And maybe they even build it on blockchain, but they're the only node. And the average person gets lost in the details where it's, oh, I thought CBDCs were bad and the government's not launching a CBDC. So therefore, like this Fed Now thing, maybe that's not as bad. Do you think that the government will most likely try to take the route of maximum control, but then just cloak it in a different branding to try to deceive people?
I think some people will try to push for that, but I think there is enough people on the other side who want to create a more like open dollar. And I think like Circle is one of those players. Yeah, so I'm just hopeful and to extend how like we can influence that. We will be pushing for an open dollar with ability for people to choose between USDC, USDT, and now there is a momentum in Europe with Euro C as well. And I think Tether has a similar product as well. Yeah, so I think it will be very interesting next 5 years, and we will see who will prevail. But yeah, like in China, we have the opposite example where Chinese government have, I believe, through WeChat app, they have essentially digital form of yuan payments that they fully control, and at any point they can do anything with balance of each individual in the country. I feel like we can see that as an example, and maybe we will think twice before we will create a product like that. By we, I mean as a
Yeah, it
nation.
certainly seems, I agree. And I think a lot about what would be the kinds of things that people like you or me or other people could do to influence the overall conscious perception of the direction that the country should take. Politicians largely, I think, are operated to get as much power as they can. And so power is generally, and specifically in this country, by the electorate. So if people like your ideas, then they'll put you in power. I don't think politicians really care. I don't think if you sat them down, I think the reality is they're just trying to get elected and they don't
Hmm.
really care what financial structure that the US takes. And so I feel that ultimately it's about how do we as like a people who support cryptocurrency as a method of transaction for the flourishing of Western society, how do we create a compelling narrative and align the efforts instead of just hoping that it works out? And I'm curious if you've seen anything. I see people on Twitter that seem to be active, but is there any kind of like story or maybe centralized effort isn't the right word, but is there anything that people can like click on to learn more about why this is a good path? Because last thing I'll say on this is that I think the tendency or the temptation for the federal government to capture more power by centralizing everything under the Fed Now slash CBDC program is unless it's met with a sufficient resistance, it will happen. And average people that are working 9 to 5s and some other jobs, they're just not going to know or care enough until it all plays out, and then we look like China. So
Yeah.
I see a path for the West to take the path of if China goes yin, we go yang. If they go centralization, we double down on decentralization. And that to me seems like that's the message, right? It's don't try to out China, try to do the inverse of what they're doing, and then you can actually have a compelling economy. But I'll put that to you.
Yeah. I think there are like two approaches. I think one is that like building a product that allow people to like use, let's say, USDC stablecoin as a easy form of payment that they can use day to day, and just have a really great product to do it. It, I think, is one healthy approach to popularize that idea. And then if, let's say, 40 million people in US are using product like this and relying on it, then it will be much harder to like reverse access to something like USDC. So the good news with the most recent version of our product or Ottr wallet, you can connect it to any bank in the US, and then you can essentially move money on your bank to a wallet in form of USDC and then transact with others through Solana blockchain. And then you don't really need any knowledge how like blockchain work. It will look and feel exactly like Venmo or Cash App looks, but by using it, you essentially support this next generation open dollar platform where each customer have like basically direct ownership of that dollar amount they hold on Ottr wallet. Because the big difference between Ottr and let's say Venmo is that in Venmo case, all your dollars are held on a basically Venmo big bank account that of Venmo. And with Ottr, each customer actually have their dollars directly on the blockchain secured by the private keys that they control. And what Ottr made it simple is that we automatically like back up those keys to your personal iCloud or Google Drive. So you don't need to worry about like technical nuances of how to keep those keys safe. But at the same time, like Ottr doesn't have access to those keys and as a result to your money. So I think if people like start learning about the importance of like open dollar and access to stable coins by simply using this product in day to day, they will create a case for politician because like, why would you ban something that people like to use and it provides them value? And I think on other side, I think adoption of dollar is very strategically important for United States as a country. And I think sooner our politicians will realize that with stable coins like USDC or USDT, they essentially increase accessibility across so many countries. And in a lot of those countries, individual people want to hold dollars, but their government or banks limit that access. There is a demand, but then the like instruments are not there. So in this case, it's like a direct interest of US to increase adoption of a dollar is to support these open standards, basically.